Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. This week we're taking on a Jackie Chan film, and we've never talked about Jackie Chan really before, and we've got a very special guest to help us out with it. So joining me, Alan, and as usual, Sol.
Hello.
We have Imran Yusuf.
Hello.
Hello.
Awesome.
Hey.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really, I'm excited about this because I love talking about Jackie Chan and specifically about the Armour of God. So you're going to struggle to keep this to, an hour or so.
So would you consider yourself a Jackie Chan expert then, or is that big words?
Absolutely. Like I think I am his son. Like definitely, he doesn't know about me, but I am his son.
Well, can we start then? Can we start by sort of getting your background, like in terms of how did you discover Jackie Chan? Why do you love his films so much?
How did I discover Jackie Chan? Well, basically like anybody who lives in the West did, from the local video shop. Remember that? Remember before Netflix? Remember you had to go to this shop that had a selected amount of films that had been in the cinema like 2 years earlier, right? Yeah. And you'd go there and you could take any one film out, just one film, right? And you could take it home for a couple of days and watch it on VHS, which was vastly superior to all the digital media we have now. Because remember, when you used to rewind on a VHS, it used to take you where you wanted to go, right? Rather than, oh no, I've just skipped 15 scenes backwards. I did not intend for this to happen. What is wrong with technology? So it was the local video shop. And I think what happened is that when we moved so I used to live in Hackney, and then we moved to Harrow, northwest London. And for the first few months, whilst my parents were trying to figure out where the nearest school was, and the school was very near, they just didn't make the effort to go and look for it. When they were trying to figure out how to get me to school, like I spent a lot of time at home, and my mum was running the shop during the day. My dad would be out at work. And so in order to keep me placated, they're like, right, get a video, put it on, he'll watch it, and he'll leave us alone. And somebody thought it'd be a good idea to get this film called The Armour of God, starring this guy called Jackie Chan, who's not Bruce Lee, who's nothing like Bruce Lee, right? No. But he's a Chinese guy who does kung fu nonetheless. And I watched that film, and when it was time to return the film to the video shop, I took it back to the video shop and I took it back out again. And I did that for weeks. I couldn't stop watching Armour of God. I didn't even know there were other Jackie Chan films at this point. I watched it so many times that the video shop guy was just like, look at me going, you could have bought it now and owned it by the amount of times you spent money on it. And then I remember my brother telling me off, and he goes, don't rent this again, get another film, don't take it out again. And I came back home with it. I came back home.
So how old were you at that point?
I was 8 years old.
Oh, blimey.
Perfect age for it, I think.
Yeah, this film really works to an 8-year-old level.
Well, it's I talk about this film and the significance of Jackie Chan in my life in my Radio 4 comedy pilot, which is available right now on BBC Sounds if you care to have a look at it. Shameless plug right at the top, right? And then after that, then I discovered Jackie Chan had made other films. They all involved kung fu. They all involved beating the crap out of bad guys, and that was it. That I fell in love with Jackie Chan. He is my hero. I've got 2 of his autobiographies up in the top leftmost corner of my bookshelf because I've put everything in order of importance. So Jackie Chan is right there at the top.
Yeah, so Jackie Chan obviously appeals to children, and I must admit I'm not particularly au fait with Jackie Chan films in general. I've seen a couple of the major ones.
Yeah,
so
I will warn you, Imran. Alan is he's kind of the resident grump here, so I don't know how he's going to feel about this film. He might be nice to it. He might go hard on it.
To be fair, like kung fu films as a genre, it's just not really my cup of tea. However, having said that, comedy action, I can get on board with that. I'm a big fan of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
You probably love Rush Hour, don't you? Talking about
exactly. Yeah. This was a new one for me, this specific film. I just watched it yesterday in preparation for this.
Have you ever seen a Jackie Chan, like a real Jackie Chan film before, out of interest?
I think so, but yeah, I have, but like not to be easily pull it to memory and go, oh, yeah, I know what that's all about. So this was a fairly new thing to me. Although it did bring to mind something we watched on the show recently, Imran. We did Mortal Kombat, the classic mid-90s film. And it was like, oh yeah, this is like if you made Mortal Kombat but didn't take yourself too seriously. This is actually quite good. Having that comedy element to it and just going, all right, look, this is stupid and we know it is,
Absolutely,
so it's fun,
yeah.
makes a big difference because I just can't take kung fu films seriously.
Well, 100%. It reminded me watching it. We do a lot of James Bond stuff on this podcast with our regular guest Calvin, James Bond expert, and Alan and I don't really like any of them, with a couple of exceptions. And this really felt to me like this is that same kind of James Bond energy, but done well. Like, it's got a nice sense of humour and the character's actually likeable. He's not a horrible man. I had a weird relationship with Jackie Chan as a kid because I think I know him best for the cartoon series Jackie Chan Adventures. I don't know.
Oh my god. Oh, you're much younger than me.
I mean, I was aware of him, but then this cartoon series started, and to this day, I will stand by that show as an excellent piece of work. Far better than it has any right to be. You know, far better than a show that's based on a celebrity that just makes up a load of stuff about magic and demons. Yeah. Has any right to be. The second season of that show, when it gets into this whole plot with demons taking over the world, is like, it's incredible. It's a great show. I've watched it since as an adult, and it's right up there with the best kind of kids animation I've seen.
Oh wow.
But that show is obviously a love letter to Jackie Chan. Not only is he the main character, voiced by someone else, but it's full of references. Like, there's an episode called Armour of Gods, which is obviously a nod to this film. I think all the episodes were named after his films. Like, Project A for Astral was, like, obviously a reference to Project A. And
yeah.
So I kind of learned about him from that show, I think. And it was amazing watching this film last night. Like, there were musical cues in the film that I knew from the cartoon. I didn't know the extent to which they were kind of riffing on what he does. But I remember that made me a big fan of him. And then I stayed up late one night to watch Who Am I on Channel 5, which I think is kind of probably his most mainstream breakthrough film, I think, other than the actual Hollywood ones. That's
really interesting to hear what you think is a breakthrough film for him in terms of Jackie Chan was... he was a poor stuntman in Hong Kong for a long time. Yeah. Everybody was trying to be Bruce Lee. And then one day he found, his agent who totally believed in him, basically went, do what you want to do. Everyone's trying to be Bruce Lee. Everyone's trying to make you Bruce Lee. You do what you want to do. And then he created what he wanted to create. And then he became bigger than Bruce Lee. He became the biggest star in Asia. And he was huge in Asia, just like so big, he became quite arrogant. Like, there's stories of he became so big in Hong Kong, like he would walk into the poshest restaurants wearing his shorts with his entourage of lads, and they would go, sorry, but there, you can't wear shorts in this restaurant. And he's like, I'm Jackie Chan. and the truth is, he was right. They couldn't stop him. He was Jackie Chan. They were like, are we going to stop Jackie Chan eating this restaurant? Like, are we going to tell him to put trousers on? No, you're not, because he's Jackie Chan. There's a beautiful story. He was dating like a really famous actress. She was beautiful, and she was doing a film. She was doing a separate film in which she was going to be doing all of her stuff, and there was going to be martial arts in it. And he found out, and he turned up on set with his entire team, and he took over the choreography of the martial arts section, and they couldn't stop him. He just turned up and he goes, I'm doing this. And so he was big, and then he tried to make it in America, and there was a false start. So before Rush Hour, which was actually and before Rumble in the Bronx, which is what really made him, which allowed Rush Hour to happen, he did a film called The Protector, which was, to be honest, quite awful. It was very American, and by American I meant it had swearing, Jackie Chan shooting a gun and killing people, and naked women, a lot of naked women, like proper nakedness as well. And that film didn't endear him to an American audience because it wasn't it wasn't about what Jackie Chan's about, which is being an underdog and standing up for your friends and not killing people, right? Because in all of his classic films, he never kills the bad guy. In fact, he saves them. He'll always like beat them up and then save their life, right? So they can go to jail. And then Rumble in the Bronx happened when he was, heading towards his 40s or something. And then suddenly it was like, okay, Jackie Chan's going to make it in America. And then Rush Hour happened. But my opinion is Rush Hour and all those American films, they're not real Jackie Chan films. The real Jackie Chan films are Armour of God, Wheels and Meals, Dragons Forever, Project A Part 2.
Drunken Master?
Yeah, Drunken Master.
Cool, that's one of the few I've seen.
those films are real Jackie Chan films where he has creative control. But when he goes to America, there's insurance people all over the place. There's there's health and safety people all over the place, ruining everything. They're just ruining everything, right? So if you look at the stunts that he does in his Hong Kong films, no one in the West would do them. No one like it because you'd be mad.
I was thinking that just watching this film. In general, not just what Jackie Chan's doing, some of the other stunts as well. It was like there's one bit where a guy kind of does a backflip, lands on his shins on the edge of a table, and then relaunches himself and does another backflip to land on the floor. Like that must be so painful.
But if you watch that scene that you're talking about there very, very carefully, in the wide shots, when you get to see the faces of the bad guys, they're all Europeans. But when they actually do the fights, they're Chinese guys wearing wigs.
Some very dodgy wigs going on.
He's like, because it's really funny, like Jackie Chan has his own stunt team. Like there's a proper school of stunt people that come from his school of kung fu who know how to take a hit and how to take a fall. And today, as far as I know, only one white guy has made it onto the stunt team, and that is Bradley Allen, who's Australian. He's also very, very short, so he blends in with the rest of the Chinese stunt team. And Brad Allen is in Gorgeous, and he was in, I think, one of the Rush Hours, maybe Rush Hour 2, but he is the one non-Chinese person on Jackie Chan's stunt team, which is that's a big deal. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, to be an outsider and to make it amongst hardcore Chinese Opera Academy students as a stunt person is a huge achievement.
Yeah, I mean, that does also explain why at one point Jackie Chan fights 4 women. Until it kind of cuts to the other angle, and it's like looks like Tim Curry in Rocky Horror Show.
They're like proper martial artists, but obviously they're not stunt people and actors, which is a very different thing. But that scene where he has to fight those women is incredible because they were incredibly good, and I'm always impressed when I watch that film. I'm always impressed. And I remember the songs.
You were talking about the arrogance that he had at one point, and I did notice that he's the credited director of this film. He dubs himself into English, and he sings the songs used in the soundtrack.
He sings the ending song, Higher Than High. I wish for higher than high, into the sky. I wish for... Mountain as you to me, thunder will roar. The sound wakes the universe, dragon will soar. Higher on high, I wish for higher on high, into the sky, I charge on into the sky.
He has a very successful musical career, Jackie Chan.
Yes, he does.
In China, yeah. I forget the name of it now. There's a song of his that I got really into a few years ago called My Girl or something like that.
Is it the song from Mulan?
No, it's like this 80s pop song he released that's like My Girl. My Girl. really catchy stuff.
He's not just a stuntman. His parents sold him into a Chinese opera academy for 10 years. His parents were poor. They had escaped the mainland to get to Hong Kong. Oh, how times have changed. And in Hong Kong, they were the servants to the French colonial family that lived in the big house, and they lived in the servants' quarters. And every morning his dad would wake him up, teach him kung fu, and because they were the servants of rich colonial Europeans, he was afforded to get a proper education. Like, he was allowed to go to the good school that he couldn't afford to go to if his parents weren't servants. But he didn't fit in because he was going to school with rich kids and he wasn't rich. And then so what happened, they then got a job in Australia being servants for an Australian family, and they couldn't afford to take him, so they contractually sold him into a Chinese opera academy for 10 years, in which he had the crap beaten out of him in order to become a really good performer, singing, dancing, acting, martial arts. And that's where in the opera academy he met Sammo Hung and Yun Biao. Sammo Hung was the older guy who bullied everybody and they all hated him, and Yun Biao was the younger guy that Jackie Chan would protect. Over 10 years later, when they were struggling and trying to make money, their brotherhood was strengthened and they started making films together. And that's why Dragons Forever and Meals on Wheels is so good. It's so good. And Project A, which they're all in.
That is fascinating though, yeah, like to be the project that they literally known each other since they were kids. And the energy that will bring, especially if they've been performing together for that long. It just breed a harmoniousness.
It's a sense of fun that I think really permeates the real, as you say, Jackie Chan films. Because what I didn't say before, when I did watch Who Am I as a kid, I think they aired it with a kind of biographic documentary about Jackie Chan beforehand. And, at this time I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a stuntman. I'm going to, get really good at parkour and all these other things. And I don't know, I watched it and just thought like, oh, this isn't very good at all. And then, after that, I think I saw some of the American films that were coming out at the time, like the remake of Around the World in 80 Days he did with Steve Coogan and Shanghai Nights and things, which,
a real high point of his career.
It's like he makes them agree to one scene where he gets to be Jackie Chan in those films. And those scenes are incredible, but then the rest of the films, I do remember a Singing in the Rain sequence in, I think, Shanghai Nights that is just beautiful stuff where he gets to, fight people with an umbrella. But I kind of just thought, I guess Jackie Chan isn't all that. And it's really only now that I'm like a pretentious film fan that I've started going back to it. And I watched a few years ago The Legend of Drunken Master and its sequel. I watched Project Rumble in the Bronx even quite recently. And I do want to see all of his films, I think. The real Jackie Chan films, there is this great, charming, lovable energy. It's everything that made me like him as a kid. He's such a likable person with like a screen presence. And it actually reminded me, what you were saying about how he's quite sanitized. He doesn't, go for the kind of violence that you tend to associate with kung fu movies and what have you. It reminds me a bit of Will Smith, who I was also really into as a kid, who, again, kind of took rap music, but was like, I'm going to do, a friendly version of this. My grandma doesn't like it when I swear, I'm not going to swear. And I was obsessed with Will Smith as a kid as well. So it's nice to have these people who are friendly and safe and have the sharp edges worn off.
And it's not safe in a like kind of, they're not deliberately sanitizing it because like, they don't want someone to be offended. It's like, no, what I learned from, the fact...
It's true to him.
He's a good person. He stands up for what is right. He stands up for his friends, and that's what he did in real life as well. Like he could never accept it if he saw his friends getting picked on. Like he would intervene. Like he's like, this cannot happen. I have to protect my friends. And by watching his films, that he never shoots anybody to kill them. He never physically injures somebody to death. Like he always has this. He has this empathy even for his enemies. And you're just like, wow, like this is kind of people that we believe that our religions are founded on. That the person who's like, I'll stand for what is right, but and I'll beat you up, but I won't kill you. Like I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. And in many of his films, in Who Am I? Remember, there's that scene where he's being chased up a car park by the bad guys, and they almost drive off the edge of the car park at the highest level, and he managed to get by, and he pushes the bonnet down so the car doesn't tip over, and they all get out and they all thank him, right? And then they're like, hold on, but we need to kill him, and then they all chase him again.
I think the sense of humor in these films is great as well, and you know, I'm a big fan of Stephen Chow, who I suppose is quite similar. You know, Hong Kong comedy kung fu movies is kind of his whole thing. So, and it strikes me like it must be a kind of Hong Kong sense of humor, because it is very similar. I've been watching a lot of Stephen Chow's like really early movies recently, and there's some great gags in the Armour of God, like the bit that springs to mind where I just thought this is fantastic. He was all strapped up with dynamite in the bad guy's lair at the end, and he was threatening to blow it up, and, and then they all, you know, he lights the fuse, they all duck and cover, and then he's there like stamping on it, trying to put it out really manically, and then he accidentally lights another one without realizing, and he's just there like, hey guys, it's all right. And you know, I just thought this is played so well. He's such a good comedic performer as well. Like, he can sell these gags, and it's obviously his sense of humor. It's not like when you see Jason Statham in a comedy and he's obviously being crammed into a hole that he doesn't quite fit into. You know, whether or not he gets away with it, it just feels organic. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about the energy with his friends. It just watching his films feels really nice and pleasant and friendly.
I think maybe I remember one of my earliest memories as a child is like I hated feeling powerless. Like if somebody pushed me around or bullied me in the playground, I hated the feeling of being powerless. Like, and I still resent it today. Like, you know, I think, you know, remember, bullies aren't just in the playground. You know, bullies are everywhere throughout your entire life. They're not just in the playground. Some teachers are bullies. When you end up getting a job, some, you know, bosses are bullies. Colleagues can be bullies. As we can see around the world, political leaders are bullies. And no one should feel powerless. No one should ever feel that they don't have a right to dignity. And speaking up and reminding people of that is important. But then just watching Jackie Chan made me go, I can be that guy. Like I can take on bad guys, right? And teach them a lesson. And Armour of God just really, that, you know, that film is a...
Did you take up martial arts as a child?
I took up martial arts when I was 14. Like, I wanted to take up martial arts when I was 8 after I discovered Jackie Chan. But I guess my parents weren't very clued in into what was available to around them. That they didn't... Like, now, you Google it, you find out, you know, you can find out where the nearest anything is. Yeah. But back in, you know, 87, 88, when I was like, oh, I want to do what this guy's doing, they didn't know the first place to look. You know, I don't know whether you would have found it in the yellow pages, the Kung Fu school or whatever.
They could have sold you to
I wish they did. I wish that was like, oh, I'll see you again when I'm like 18. Right? What I learned from doing martial arts was I still remember the punches and the kicks and the blocks, and if I had to use them now, I would be able to within the, you know, for someone who hasn't trained. Like, I've learned how to punch, I've learned how to block, I've learned weirdly, I was at a gig a few years ago, and a comedian who will remain nameless, right, thought it would be funny as he went round the room. It's a weird thing. Men play this like alpha male game for some reason. Well, not men, insecure men like to play this alpha male game, right? All right, you size up who's in the room, who's the most important, the most famous. And there was a famous comedian, like a real famous comedian in the room. And then there was, you know, the comedian who'd organised the gig. And then there was me, right, who was the skinniest and, you know, least important. And the comedian thought it'd be funny as he went and shook everybody's hand. When he shook my hand, and then he thrust his elbow straight into my chest and went boom, like that. Just boom. And I'm like, and it hit me right here, and I flew back and I'm like, what the hell was that? And he's like, well, you got to be ready. You got to be ready, man. If it's going to kick off, you got to be ready. And I was like, what the hell was that? And then I just thought, I was so stunned by it. And then he started doing other moves on me. He came up to me. He started to like get into my space. And I was like, this guy doesn't know who I am. And the next thing, he's on the floor and I've got him in a full body lock. Like, I've got his head in his arms, like a total like MMA lock. And as he did that, someone took a picture to go, I can't believe Imran Yusuf has just put this guy into like a full like martial arts lock on the floor. And what he did, and the comedian, in order to save his pride, he just went limp. He's just like, yeah, I'll let you make all the effort. Yeah, I'll just, because he couldn't get out of it. He couldn't get out of it. And then,
it's like when Rod Hull and Emu were attacking Snoop Dogg on that on that chat show, and then the camera sort of cut away and then cut back, and Snoop Dogg had him in a headlock.
I've not seen this. I need to see this.
It's amazing stuff.
Please make sure that's in the link when this goes
Yeah.
out.
What I'm learning from this is the stand-up circuit is a bit like Prison Rules.
Yeah.
You got to find the biggest guy and then try and beat him up to make an impression.
And I think Jackie Chan has that kind of, lovable underdog energy, because he's not an imposing man to look at him,
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing of like, we've all got that. There's a Jackie Chan in all of us.
Should we kind of get into the film itself a bit then?
I mean, the first thing I noticed in the very opening little sequence where we establish the character is just like, this is very Indiana Jones-esque, isn't it?
Yes.
You could tell when this was made.
I think Indiana Jones was like a specific influence on this one in particular from what I've read.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, in terms of things that perhaps haven't aged well, the film opens with Jackie Chan, and a load of sort of native tribesmen. He's stealing an artifact from them. He kind of just he like tries to communicate with them by like shouting a load of gibberish. He just sort of goes and they're sort of like, what?
Yeah, it was that has not aged well at all. That has not aged. But you could not in defense. I mean, and all those native people, I think, are basically Europeans who've been browned up.
Yeah.
Quite weirdly, and that's definitely, it was never acceptable. But the reason it happened wasn't an overt racist decision. I think that was just, unfortunately, it was a very accepted and ignorant way to portray a native people. I mean, I think now, looking back, loads, not in its defense at all, loads of people did it because it was just, if we don't know any better, we will accept what is kind of normalized to us. Probably what saves it. It was, they didn't tell you what the name of those people were, what country they were from, or what culture. They were just made up. Yeah. They were just, they were practically orcs, right? They were just, just that's what they're meant to be. And then the film, carried on in its fashion. And quite interestingly, the hot babe of the show, the hot European babe in the show is Lola Fauna, who was also in Wheels and Meals and in the Project A films as well, I believe. She also appeared in those, and she was a model. I think she was like a Spanish or Portuguese model or something like that. They knew that in order for the film to be able to sell in other territories, that they needed to have more than Chinese people in. It needed to be set somewhere in Europe or somewhere in the West. They needed to have Europeans in it. And so he did that, but he still retained his creative license to make the best kung fu fight scenes ever. And that's, so getting into the film, you've got to hands down say, the best martial arts scenes are Jackie Chan's. They're the best of the best. Like, nothing touches them. Although I do give kudos to The Raid, the first Raid film.
Yeah.
But that's very different. It was very brutal. Like, that was all blood and guts, that film.
Generally speaking, action isn't enough for me in a movie. Like, I need like a strong story or something there. And, I do enjoy action, but I will often just switch off if a movie is just action. It just doesn't do it for me. But there's something about how it's done in Jackie Chan's movies that I find really engaging. Like, it isn't just people punching each other. There's always a gimmick. Like the classic one, I think, maybe this is the cartoon I'm thinking of, but the classic one for me was always, there's, a priceless vase in the room, and he's trying to, because he was an archaeologist in that cartoon. So it was always trying to preserve the artifacts while the henchmen are coming at him who don't care, and he'd be there, or I think, is there a film where he's got a baby that he's trying to protect while he's fighting and things like that? Have I just imagined that? It's that kind of, extra element that just makes it really interesting. And it just something about how it's shot and the choreography. Yeah, this is a film that is kind of all about the fight scenes and the action sequences. And it really works here, I think.
Yeah, like for me, the difference is that he's injecting humor into it, like I said. Yeah. And it is extraordinarily creative, and it's it is just like, you can just give Jackie Chan an item and then he'll fight with it, but like in an interesting way. Like even to the point, there's a running gag through this film that the way he puts chewing gum into his mouth is different every time, and he's just trying to up himself.
You know what? It's really changed now because the Armour of God that I grew up watching is not the same Armour of God that you would have seen. And the reason is this, is that so the VHS copy that I would have watched back in the 80s, it was dubbed by an actual American actor. Yes. What had happened after Rumble in the Bronx flew and then Rush Hour came out, all of his movies were re-released in the West on DVD, and then he got to dub them in English.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't so I remember in the original dub that I watched, these are the lines that he said, that that American actor said, dubbing Jackie Chan's voice. He goes, "When I was a kid, I dreamt about being a hero, saving people and doing good deeds." But the actual Cantonese translation was, when I was a kid, I dreamt of being like Jesus Christ, saving people and doing good deeds. But they thought, well, if you say that, you might lose some people. Why is the Chinese guy talking about, Jesus? But yeah, now that copy, that VHS copy of Armour of God, like I've tried to find it and I can't. I want the copy that I grew up with, but I can't find it. That dub, and I don't know who that actor was either. Like, who did the voices for Jackie Chan in those films? Because that's who Jackie Chan was to me. That voice, was that American actor's voice.
The backstory of the Jackie Chan character here is that he was in a pop group that appeared to be like Bucks Fizz or something like that, a very 70s kind of pop group. But then he was spurned for love, and so he became a soldier of fortune. I mean, it's an obvious career route, isn't it?
You don't know how close, like, Robbie from Take That came to going to fighting ISIS in Syria.
It's a beautiful backstory. They managed to cram it in about 5 minutes. So, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, find some fancy armor. So then they are chasing this specific... the Armour of God, which is 5 pieces. And there's some backstory to why that is, but it's not really important. The point is that he's going to go and fight some people. And then they're going to save the girlfriend who's been kidnapped. There's another woman who is the European woman you were mentioning there.
Yeah.
And that's quite a nice dynamic. So the main group of 3, nice dynamic. And the woman there, she's kind of goes toe-to-toe with them for the most part, which is quite nice, particularly for an 80s movie. She's not a damsel in distress. She's a strong character, and there's a little bit of frisson between her and Jackie Chan. It never quite really goes anywhere, but there is a really nice scene where they're going around her apartment or whatever it is, and Alan Tam is kind of hiding. And again, when we were just talking about being creative with the space and all that, that was just really nicely choreographed, just jumping from one cupboard to another, like shifting things and just hiding it. It felt like comedy, or like farcical comedy, but in quite a realistic way.
Yeah.
which for farce is quite good.
The scene you're describing there has a deleted scene. So in the version that I grew up watching, they had taken it out, and then I discovered that there was a version. There's a dream sequence where Jackie Chan dreams that he's being chased by his car, and there's like a checkered floor or something. And that wasn't in the version that I grew up watching, and it's around the scene. So it's weird that it's also an earlier on you were talking about Who Am I, and I believe in the original Chinese version, the Hong Kong version of Who Am I, there's a scene they took out in the Western release, maybe because it was really dangerous. So what this African tribe is helping him recuperate after he lands, like, where they live. And there's a scene where he's dressed like he's Masai Mara, like he's part of the Masai, sorry. And he picks up a lion cub, and they're like, put it back. And then he's chased by a lioness up a tree. And they show the scene. And what they've done in the scene, they've got Jackie Chan on a wire that you can't see. And as the lioness chases him, he runs up the tree as the wire is pulling him up. And he avoids the claw swipe of the lioness. And I went, wow, he's amazing. Like, I believed he really did it when I saw it as a teenager. I think that scene has been taken out of the Western release I saw later on, maybe because they're like, we don't want kids copying this. I don't think this is a safe thing to show people.
Well, you're saying that the other things that are in this film are perfectly safe. Yes.
Yes, everything else.
Base jumping onto a hot air balloon.
Base jumping onto a hot air balloon, or sliding down the sloping building in Rotterdam. That's perfectly fine. We'll understand if you do that, but just don't mess with the lion cubs.
The plot is there. There's some sort of plot, but let's focus on the action scenes. Let's go there. So near the end, he does base jump off a cliff, which then mysteriously disappears, and he's in the 10,000 feet up in the air.
It's a very high cliff. It's a very, very high cliff.
And he lands on a hot air balloon, which then somehow he manages to abseil off of. But I don't know what he's attached to.
It's so awkwardly filmed, that bit, that you know it's like really happening. Like that's what I like, is you sort of think, right, this is so kind of weirdly shot. He's really up there on that balloon. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, like he did it. He clearly jumped out of it. Like, they cut it, probably did 17 different takes, right, at least. But, he did, obviously jumped out of a plane, landed in a hot air balloon, and then did, all right, now we need to get make sure that the abseiling equipment is available. And then he climbs into the hot air balloon, and you're like, oh, just all in a day's work for Jackie Chan. It's just a regular day for him.
It reminded me of James Bond, because it's the sort of thing, almost, that you'd see in a James Bond movie, but...
Yeah.
It would just be a bit too glossy and blatantly, a stuntman, or it just doesn't work in James Bond for me. Whereas here, it's like, wow, that's just really impressive. I can just sit and watch this.
It's because, in a Bond film, everything, it's like, okay, so the stuntman's going to do this. We have to shoot this from behind, a quick cut here so the wig doesn't show, blah, 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 blah. Whereas with this, it's like, look, Jackie Chan is abseiling off a hot air balloon, so we're going to stick a nice static shot on it and show him doing it. And so the editing is totally different. It's not as dynamic even, because it just feels slower. But speaking of Bond there, actually, there was another really Bond moment where they're about to get shot in their car, and he just sort of like presses a button, and a little tiny car comes out of the bonnet. and it was like, where did that come from? That didn't fit with anything else.
Apparently, in every film Jackie Chan would do, Mitsubishi would give him, I think 2 free cars.
Right, yeah.
Wow. Like, they go, you do what you want to do. So that's why there's always a Mitsubishi car in his film. And that little tiny escape pod in his car was hysterical. It was a great idea, clearly. Like, how are you going to escape being rammed by 2 Land Rovers?
It was just not quite Bond, because it required Jackie Chan to sit on Alan Tam's lap and escape. And it's like... There's a different attitude.
I've made a note of a few lines that really made me laugh because the dub was so awkward. There was a line, for example, when the bad guy... What is it? The main female character's trying to, infiltrate the bad guys, and she's going to hit him over... He's, trying to kiss her.
Yeah.
And she's going to hit him over the head with a bottle. And I just wrote down, because he looks up and sees her before she does it. And it's such an odd moment. But I think it is partly the dub. The guy just went, "You're not a prostitute. You wanted to hit me in the head with that bottle." And he looks really hurt. And it's like, I don't know what this dynamic was that you thought you had before that. I don't know, that you're so emotionally wounded.
The bit that really made me laugh was after that. So she's pretending to be a prostitute at this point. And then a couple of scenes later, she's having an intimate moment with Jackie Chan. And it looks like they're finally going to seal the deal. And I'm sure as a comedian, Imran, you can relate to this. We've all been in a situation where it's like, this is a really good opportunity for a joke, but it's going to ruin my chance of getting laid here. And what I like about that is Jackie Chan goes for the joke. he says, am I going to have to pay for this? And she slaps him and he doesn't sleep with her. But I respect it.
All of his movies, I think in Twin Dragons, he did a love scene, and that was about it. That's as far as that. But traditionally in his films, he doesn't get the girl. He saves the day, but he doesn't get the girl.
I think we know he could have got the girl if he wanted it. That's all we need to know.
Well, it's really weird. It's a cultural thing. I think I grew up in a fairly conservative, Muslim Indian family, and so sex scenes on TV, the moment that happened, we were scrambling for the TV control, trying to change the channel, right? And even now as an adult, when there's a sex scene in the show, I'm like, why? Just what, I think it wastes time. I just think it's a waste of time. Do you really think if somebody wants to watch sex scene, they can go onto, somewhere on the internet? I don't know the name of the website. Don't ask me. What is it with this persecution? So you can go and find something that will be thorough and more to your liking.
Even, not just sex scenes, but just romantic subplot. Obviously, it's fine if that's, a significant part of the film, do it. Yeah. But, I think I remember talking on this show about, is it the third Captain America movie? And they're like, they're in the middle of, rushing from this huge action scene in an airport to this other thing to save the world, huge stakes. And then out of nowhere, they just pull over so Captain America can kiss the niece of the woman he loves from the olden days.
Oh, that's creepy.
And she's 70 years younger than him as well. That's weird.
We don't need him to have a love interest every film. There's other, entertaining things happening. So I do like it when a film like this, is comfortable puncturing that a bit and being like, yeah, whatever. And I did read actually that the original director of this film, Eric Sang, I think was quite a big driving force towards getting more women in there, not in a kind of representation way, in a kind of, the men want to have some beautiful women in the film kind of way. So I get the impression that, it was almost quite like Jackie Chan had pressure to add these romantic aspects into the films, which, makes sense. So I like that it's still quite at arm's length. Yeah, actually, speaking about that, this film wasn't originally directed by Jackie Chan. It was this guy called Eric Sang. And I was reading that apparently Jackie Chan had like the most hideously awful near-death experience of his career on this film.
Yeah, they had to stop. That's why the length of his hair changes at the start of the film and then shortly after the first few shots. They're like, oh, now his hair's really long. Like, what? How did he manage to have a haircut in the 20 seconds it's taken to run from there to there? Or like, what's happened? And that was it. Yeah, there's a scene right at the start of the film. He grabs a branch that snaps. And then he falls out of a tree and hits the floor, and he ends up with a massive hole in his head. And they were out filming. I think they had to get to a hospital in the former Yugoslavia, and it was all very, it was a hole in his head, like it was really, really bad. And then after that was sorted, he got back up and he made the film, continued making the film after almost dying on it.
But that's it. He was out of action for, I think, months, if not weeks.
Yeah,
and,
it was months.
So Eric Sang, who was, this high-demand director, was like, well, I love you, Jackie, but I've got to go make some other films, make some money. I can't sit around waiting for this. So then when the production started up again, Jackie Chan was like, I'll just do it.
I'll just do it.
But yeah, apparently he's got like a plug in his skull to this day, because there's like a piece of skull missing, and he has to have it to like protect his brain.
Yeah, he's broken everything. Like in all of his films, like he is, he has sustained really horrible injuries. So in Armour of God, he almost died. In Police Story, he burnt the skin off his hands by doing the pole slide, where the rest of his team ate cement flying off the bus. Right, that I think is, you need to see that scene in Police Story where they all fly off the bus, and you're like, oh my god, they really did that. They really flew out of a bus, like it stopped and they flew out the windows. Rumble in the Bronx, he broke his foot on the hovercraft, and if you watch very carefully towards the end of the film, he continues to make the film, and what they've done, they've basically more or less painted the shoe or put the shoe over the cast, over his massive cast, and he's continued to make the film.
That's fantastic. Is this some horrible, evil impulse I have? But like, I love it in a film when you do catch a real injury like that. Nothing too bad, but like in Mission Impossible, whatever it is, when you see Tom Cruise jump across that building and you see the moment that he, breaks a bone in his ankle and he's limping, it just adds this element of realism, this kind of sense of dedication to what they're doing. And it, you don't need to know that's there. It just makes the film feel so much more authentic. And obviously I don't want harm to come to the people making these films, but I don't know, they're like capturing these little moments of realism. It's
what you've
cool.
Just reminded me of there, and this is completely unrelated, but what you just reminded me there, do you know the film Predator, the original Predator?
Yeah.
So there is a very, very brief second in which the character Billy kicks a vulture, and he actually kicked the vulture. And I remember as a kid, my brother going, did he actually kick a vulture? And you watch it and go, he kicked a vulture. Like he actually, and then I'd go to the credits and go, that bit of like no animals were harmed in the making of this film. I'm sure that's missing from that film. They kicked a vulture. Like they kicked it. He proper kicked it. Proper like wallop straight off. And I'm like, wow, he kicked an animal.
And that's how Jackie Chan trains his stunt guys.
Yeah. Oh, it's brutal. Like, because remember the Chinese Opera Academy he would have gone to would have been breaking, the kind of laws that would protect us, and but that's what made them good. And it's an ugly thing about humanity of just like, just sometimes those hard, but still, they didn't kill the children in the school. They just beat them until they were perfect. But fortunately, Jackie Chan suffered all of that so that he could entertain us. And he wanted to entertain us. And we were entertained and inspired.
Yeah. We always give our movies a little rating out of 10 at the end. So I guess we'll do that now then. Alan, do you want to go first? Alan's usually the sort of more downbeat guy here. I can't tell where he's going to go today. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. This film, and I think Jackie Chan films in general, they fall under that category, as we've discussed before, a bit like Laurel and Hardy, in that I respect it and I respect the craft, but not necessarily enjoy it on the actual level that it's supposed to be. And it's fun. It is just a silly watch. If you're not trying to take it seriously, it's fine. And so on that level, I gave it a 6 out of 10.
I mean, that's quite good for you, yeah.
Okay, can I just ask Alan? Okay, you're giving it a 6 out of 10, but if you could give the fight scene at the end of the film, right, from the whole time he's inside the mountain and he beat up a whole team of evil monks and then a bunch of women as well, right? Right. That scene alone, what would you rate that out of entertainment value? Just that scene itself.
I'll give it a 7.
Oh my god! All right. Wow.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm being quite harsh as well here. Like, I did enjoy the film a lot, but it was very much like I love these little moments, and watching the whole thing as a whole, there were moments where it was a bit slower. But I do love Jackie Chan and his whole thing, his oeuvre. I mean, to be honest, I think I've probably enjoyed Legend of Drunken Master a little bit more than this one, but this was good as well. So yeah, I give it a really solid 7 out of 10, which I also feel is quite harsh after this discussion. But I'll tell you what, I'll give that final fight scene on its own a 9 out of 10. I think that was great stuff.
Great.
Yeah, Imran, and feel free to go as high as you like with this.
I'm biased. I'm totally biased. Just if you're for me, it will always be a 10 because I can't, because of what it means to me, because my childhood is in that film. It's great, sure, it's it starts off with a great action scene and then it can be quite slow for a while, and then but that bit of the moment he enters that mountain to fight the monks, it is just absolutely extraordinary. And every now and then, I'll just go on YouTube and watch Jackie Chan fight scenes from Armour of God or Wheels and Meals. Just watch. If you just type in Jackie Chan fight scenes and just let the internet entertain you, I can't get enough of it.
I've spent a fair bit of time in those sorts of quirky bars that'll just have like TV screens showing weird clips from old films in them, and I feel like Jackie Chan fight scenes are that sort of content. You'd be in like a hipster bar and you turn the corner and there'd be a big screen with just Jackie Chan fighting someone. But yeah, in theory we kind of pitch sequel ideas on this podcast, but there are a couple of sequels already.
Yeah, there's actually so there's Operation Condor, which is Armour of God 2, and then there's Chinese Zodiac, which is Armour of God 3. So if I was going to pitch a sequel, Armour of God 4, starring Jackie Chan and me. That is a dream come true. That would be the dream come true.
I mean, I'd watch it. I had a really quick glimpse at those sequels. So the second one, it seems, is pretty well regarded, and that was made.
Yeah, Operation Condor was great.
And then the third one, it looked like people weren't as into, but it was one of these more. I think it was from like 2012.
Yeah, it wasn't as good. I think stuff from that 80s, early 90s era. Jackie Chan was just gold.
And I mean, the plot for that sounded a lot like the plot to Jackie Chan Adventures, certainly the first season, where he's like hunting down artifacts that are all kind of tied to the Zodiac and each have like a Zodiac power. So I might have to check them out. But yeah, I mean, he's still working a lot. I had a look, and he had about 10 films coming out in his, IMDb page that are, filming or what have you. And
he's because he's just we can't get enough of him. And I just we're all used to Jackie Chan being this lovable hero and making films to the standard and quality he does. If you want to see something slightly different, which is really good and will allow you to see Jackie Chan in a different light, I'd recommend watching the Shinjuku incident, which is based on the true events of Chinese immigrants, refugees who escape China and end up on the shores of Japan and end up in the criminal underworld in Tokyo. And
is that the more recent one where Jackie plays the kind of crime kingpin, like he's the villain, or am I thinking of something else?
Probably yes. Like he's not. I wouldn't say he's the kingpin, but he ends up being one of the Chinese people who's living within the Japanese criminal underworld. And there's a division. There's the Japanese, criminal underworld, and they allow the Chinese criminal underworld to exist, providing it doesn't encroach upon the Japanese. And it's unbelievable. Like what happens is at first his love, his girlfriend, goes to Japan, going, I'll wait for you when you get to Japan. Come look for me. And then he ends up there. They wash ashore. They dodge the police. And then he finds out that his girlfriend, his love, has married a Yakuza boss. And so he can never have her. Also, it being based on true events, and also his acting, like he's not doing lovable, Jackie Chan Kung Fu. He's doing something very real. And the performance, suddenly to see my favorite Kung Fu hero actor doing something quite serious, but still fighting, was something else. And also just the story of how much suffering that these Chinese refugees, these immigrants or migrants that are trying to escape the hell of the mainland, what they have to do to survive in Japan. So I'd highly recommend that, the Shinjuku incident.
Nice. Before we finish,
on a somber note.
Before we finish, Imran, I've got to ask you. Now I know you appeared in the film Finding Fatima.
Oh,
yes, I did.
Produced by Sol. So I just wondered if you had any stories of his terrible producer antics.
You know what? I googled that and I remember I was like, holy crap! Did he? Because I've kind of forgotten about it because
so was everyone
remember
else.
I think what had happened. I think because the filming, because I was only in a few scenes, so like I turned up, did one scene, and then was away for like weeks or whatever, and then came back, seen one film, and then I was gone. So like the memory I've got of it is I remember it's the first time I've seen actors, the main actor, have to wear a bin bag to have lunch. Like, because he was in a nice suit and we couldn't afford to get him in and out of it during lunch, he basically, they punctured a black bin bag and made him wear it, right? And then that's how he'd eat his lunch. And I was like, wow, this is how they make films, man. I was in a Amazon Prime thing that still hasn't gone out yet, and we were filming in Thailand, and which is in itself a bit of a holiday because we're like, oh right, you got to go out to Thailand. As we're filming there, it's like, yeah, you got to put on a black bin bag to have your lunch, and I'm like, I'm a proper actor now. I'm as important as Danny from Finding Fatima.
Yeah, have you got anything that you'd like to plug other than your pilot that you mentioned earlier? Though you can mention that again if you like.
Well, I guess I'll mention that again. Well, I'm heading back out into the comedy clubs as lockdown restrictions are being lifted. Yes, I have a Radio 4 comedy pilot out at the moment called Imran Yusuf Relabeled. It's about me exploring about the labels that I've been born with and the labels that I've chosen. Since it's the pilot, I chose the label man. What does it mean to be a man? And heavily influenced by Jackie Chan. So I mentioned Jackie Chan in the pilot. It's available for free on BBC Sounds and Radio 4, so please look that up, Imran Yusuf Relabeled. Check out if you want to check out I've got 7 million hits on YouTube, so I'm quite funny. Please do check out my content, and if you like it, share it and tell people about it, and maybe one day Sol and I will get to work on a Jackie Chan film and take a picture in black pin liners during lunchtime.
Well, I've made a note of another quote from the film that I thought we could go out on, because it really did just sum up how I was feeling last night. And that's the point where one of the bad guys just says, the only thing standing in my way is Alan. Thanks for listening.